You know that feeling when the government promises a big report and you think, finally, we're going to get all of the answers that we need that happened in relation to this event. And then you open that report only to find there's a bunch of stuff that's redacted. There's answers that are not available, recommendations that are confidential, that are supposed to be on the public record. That is the basic vibe of the interim report for the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism. What you need to know is the report that was released is just a public version. There's nothing classified in there. There's nothing that could affect the ongoing criminal case that is happening in relation to the Bondi shooting. So if you were hoping for an extremely detailed report that was going through everything blow by blow as to what happened, then you're going to be disappointed. Hi, my name's Hayder Shakara, and I like to break down legal stories so that you can understand what's going on in this country a little better. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through what this interim report actually contains, what the recommendations say so you can understand how it would affect you, and what I think this tells us about where the future recommendations are going to go for Australia and what that means for social cohesion and legal repercussions. Now, the report spends a fair bit of time explaining why it's being so careful, and the big reason is pretty simple, and that's that there are ongoing criminal proceedings linked to the Bondi attack. These are still in its infancy stages. Nothing really has happened that much apart from the charges, and there hasn't been much progress in the case because it's still very early days. That means a lot of information that you would expect in the report isn't actually in there. The public wants answers, the government wants answers, it needs to be seen to be doing something. And so what this report does is it actually focuses really on systems and processes, and was somebody given notification, and was the right process followed, and how can we keep processes updated. And if you look at the recommendations, a lot of those recommendations really focus on how the whole machine works together, how different bodies speak to one another, how counterterrorism systems work in Australia. Then it also spends some time on how we're going to be regulating firearms, because that's become one of the big areas of contention where the Commission wants fast action because it's something that they can do immediately, and it's about controlling the use of firearms, controlling the distribution of firearms. Now, there's another section of the report that says that some big questions about who's to blame, who's at fault, whether resources were allocated properly, whether the police were coordinated in their efforts, all of those questions as to who we can point the finger at, that can't be decided just from these documents. And in order to get to the bottom of that, you're going to need hearings, you're going to need evidence, you're going to need to understand the situation a little bit better. So this report isn't about sitting behind a desk and pointing fingers and deciding who was wrong and who could have done better. As a result of this report, we have the recommendations that have been put forward, and I guess that's the key focus as to what we want to get into. There are 14 recommendations in total, but recommendations 8 to 12 currently confidential. They're redacted and the public can't see them. So we have no idea what those recommendations are at this stage. This report was released into the public, and to me, that doesn't do a lot for public trust because people want to understand what the recommendations are. So we can only judge 9 of them right now at this stage. And I think that's going to create a big issue of trust when it comes to the public, because that's what these processes are for, that so people can understand what is going on behind the scenes. So let's go through the recommendations. The first one is to ensure that any kind of Jewish festivals or public events are going to be considered in a more high-risk category, and therefore the police will need to be attending in higher numbers and provide more support during those types of services. You then go from recommendations number 2 to number 7, and those recommendations I would put kind of under one category because they're all about how different agencies can talk better to one another, how policies need to be renewed or updated every 3 years, how there needs to be more of an effort by people of parliament to look at these policies and to do certain training. So it goes, I guess, a little bit deeper into systems and how coordination works between different entities. And all of that comes down to making sure that there's no confusion in the middle of a chaotic situation like the Bondi shooting, and there is a streamlined approach to how to deal with it. Because when you do have that confusion, you can have people waiting on decisions when they don't know who's responsible for making those decisions when it comes to that chaotic type of situation. And then we go into the recommendations 13 and 14, which are probably going to be the most controversial when it comes to the public, and it goes to firearms. One recommendation says there needs to be a prioritizing of a national consistent firearms agreement. And then another one is about a buyback scheme for guns to make sure that firearms can be purchased by the states and so that it can reduce the amount of gun violence. Now, these recommendations, I think, are really going to be a big hand grenade. They obviously raise all sorts of questions for people that own guns legitimately. It also is going to be a big political problem. The fact that firearms reform is in the interim report, it suggests that the commissioner thinks that something could be done about this immediately, and it doesn't need to be parked and looked at years later. It needs to be done in the immediate future. So here's my view of the current interim report. I think it's shaped by the current legal realities. I think it's very limited in what it can do. I'm a little bit concerned about the confidential recommendations, the fact that we don't know what they are about. I would have thought that it would have been better to release a more complete report as opposed to an interim report. I think there are going to be huge issues about regulating firearms. I think there's a large part of Australia that thinks that firearms are completely unnecessary, whilst there's another whole segment which thinks it is necessary. So I think that's going to stoke a whole huge debate. We've already seen the fallout between the Liberals and the Nationals Party in relation to the free speech argument. And I think there's going to be another argument when it comes to what to do with firearms within that party. So I'm keen to hear from all of you. What do you think about this report? Do you think it's acceptable that recommendations 8 to 12 are confidential given what's going on currently? Or do you think there should have been more robust recommendations, or at least wait and have a delay before releasing the report and having a more complete report? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.